Babylonians during the reign of King Zedekiah. He says, gather thyself, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against us. They shall smite Israel with a rod upon the cheek. Now, the idea is one of those insulting things, two insulting things you can do to somebody, spit in their face or slap them. And then the other one is throw a shoe, like George Bush ducked. That's signs of they had no respect, disrespect. And in Israel, the king of Israel at this time is Zedekiah. He's the last king of Israel, 586 BC, because after he's done his kingship in a sense, the city is destroyed, the temple is destroyed and burned. His real name was Mattaniah. Mattaniah means God's gift. But Nebuchadnezzar changed his name to Zedekiah, which means the Lord is just. Both definitions, both names he don't live up to. He was changed by Nebuchadnezzar. He's an accidental king. The guy that's running it is accidental. He was so far down the line of succession, didn't nobody ever thought he'd be king. And Nebuchadnezzar just kept going down the line until he got somebody he could work with. Zedekiah was the son of Joash. Yes, he was. But he had two older brothers. He's the 20th and the last king when the temple stood. Josiah was 11 years as a good king. Jehoiachin had 3 months. Jehoahaz, 3 months. Jehoiakim died in office. And Mattaniah and Zedekiah came on the scene. Actually, 3 brothers are ahead of him. And he would reign 11 years. So he got it by default. You could say became king. And Nebuchadnezzar made these kings vassal kings. They did what he wanted to say. And he kept the Jewish lineage and the Jewish royalty to keep the people in line. If he took away altogether their leadership, you could have quite a rebellious crowd on his hands. And one thing the Jews were is excitable, always have been. Now under Zedekiah, Nebuchadnezzar found out that after 11 years, Zedekiah did what his brothers did. They turned on Nebuchadnezzar, began to tell him to take a hike. They weren't going to do certain things. And Nebuchadnezzar would have them removed. 11 years, and Zedekiah's raising up an army. He's looking to Egypt. He wants Egypt to help him. And he thinks he's got it made, except Egypt never shows up. He got to deal with Zedekiah, with Nebuchadnezzar. And this is when he goes in under Zedekiah. And it says it's broken down, means he breached the walls of Jerusalem. He burned down the temple. Now, the story is, the Romans claim, and Josephus, that there is so much gold, hinges and doorknobs and things in the temple, that gold just melted and ran out, and they collected it. Then they carried away all the artifacts, the Lord's Supper table, the Ark of the, well, they had the Ark of the Covenant, but the other implements, carried them all to Babylon. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was so irritated, he slew Zedekiah. But not before he did one thing. He wanted Zedekiah to see something. He killed Zedekiah's sons right in front of his dad. And then he put his eyes out. And he wrapped Zedekiah in chains and carried him off. So the last thing he remembers seeing is his sons die. That's how they worked it. The smiting and the slapping of one's cheek, we said, was the ultimate insult, disrespect. Now in verse 2, he says, Bethlehem, or Bethlehem Ephratah. That's the Bethlehem that Christ is going to be born in. 6 miles from Jerusalem to the southwest. Now, if you were ever over there and you saw the old city of Bethlehem, right outside, there's a big old valley there, and it's all fenced off, and it's called the Shepherd's Valley, where they brought the sheep right up to the area to be worshipped, to be sacrificed. And, of course, Bethlehem means house of bread, and Christ is what? The bread of life. Ephratah means fruitful. So this area where Bethlehem at one time was fruitful. It was a grain. It grew a lot of grain and harvest grain. It was a breadbasket for Jerusalem, for the Jews. It was a great area. You wouldn't know it today. If you went there today, it's just all dirt and sand. And actually, Bethlehem is in a Arab city. So they control the city, but they don't. They're fear enough of the Christians that they don't mess with the church and stuff there. But that's the only thing that's halfway right in the whole area. It's very depressed, very dirty, and the Arabs don't really care. They make money. They charge you to get into Bethlehem, to the city. And then, of course, the Catholic Church has the church there, and they charge you to go in. Then they charge you to light candles there. And Carl Weigerfer and I stood in the back because it was so crowded trying to get down there where these tombs were. And we watched the guy blow them out and put them back when people go down in there. And he'd resell the candle. So they're making money. I mean, it's a lot of things happen. Jerusalem's in 4 quarters as a city. And a lot of things are just money makers, although historical in a sense. So it's a fruitful area, but itself, Bethlehem is a very insignificant town. If we were to pick a place, and we were God, we probably wouldn't pick Bethlehem, Ephrata. It's just a dust bowl. It's a dirty place. Many cities in Israel had more influence, more political power, more stature, more wealthy people than Bethlehem. So it's not a place we would pick, anybody else would pick. But God picked it, where he would be manifested in the flesh. It's the royal city of David. Now, Micah is the very first prophet to understand this, the value of Bethlehem, Ephrata. They knew about Judah, and now he's the smallest tribe, the dirt spot in the road. I mean, if in America here, it'd be like driving through one whole town, you know. I remember years ago, I got stuck on the Interstate 20, and my GPS said you can go through Van, Texas. And I didn't know Bill Sparks, a friend of mine, lived there at the time. He was moving into Van. I didn't know that. But I went through Van, and Van basically was a 4-way stop. That's what it was. Store, 4-way stop, follow the road, you went back to the interstate. You avoided the accident. And then Bill said, I bet you've never been to Van one day. And I said, I bet I have. And it's a 4-way stop sign in the middle of the town. That's it. And he said, yeah, that's it. That's Van. It's off the beaten path. Now, he's writing against this, about this. And it's like anybody else. If Las Vegas was around at the time, they would have had bets on this. How if the Lord would really be born in Bethlehem, Ephrata. It would have gone against the odds. It's been very high. He wrote it down. He also says in here, if you look what he said, he says a man. He also tells them it's going to be a man, a male child. Now, he speaks of a time in verse 3 between the incarnation and his prophecy being fulfilled. Judah would have her sovereignty. She's the headquarters of Egypt, or Israel, the Jerusalem area, the royal tribe. But the Babylonians would take a hold of the Assyrians, and the Babylonians take a hold of the land. And after that would be the Persians, the Greeks, and finally the Romans. So the house of David fell on evil times, bad times. By the time Christ goes into the city, when he's born, an Aramean, a half Jew, ran it, named Herod. That's where there's no room for a birth of the Savior. I'm going to tell you, there's no Holiday Inn, there's no Best Western, nothing, unless they built it since I was there. That's not there. You go into Jerusalem, outside of the town, that's where all that kind of stuff is. The Arabs don't care about that. He says the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, Ephrata, and that's the royal city of David. I mean, it's a dirt spot in the road. And a woman with the pangs of birth. That's the nation of Israel and the struggles that Israel has maintaining its sovereignty, maintaining its power with God. And really, the first thing we should be concerned with is the power of God. Being right with God, and Israel was not. So the family of David, their importance shrinks through all of this. Down to a peasant girl and a carpenter, Joseph and Mary. It's that far they went down. Probably there's nobody else in the city who would even admit to hardly that they were the royal line of David, but they were. Now in verses 4 through 6, he talks about the second coming. He shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord and the majesty. The name of the Lord is God. And they shall abide, for now shall they be great unto the end of the earth. Now, up to this point, at Calvary, we'll say, Christ retains the title all the way to the cross of the Great Shepherd. But in the Old Testament, the sheep were always slain for the shepherds, for the people. They slew sheep. They raised them, brought them up there, ones without blemish, and those are the ones they sacrificed on a daily basis. The difference is at Calvary, the shepherd is slain. For who? The sheep. It's a whole reversal. Jesus will reign as a shepherd. Now, David and his lineage was a shepherd king. And if, you know, the Egyptians didn't like shepherds. But yet, when Joseph was second in charge, they put him in the land of Goshen, which was very fertile. Very good to him. The other Gentiles didn't like the shepherds either. But David was a shepherd king. He was out watching his sheep for his dad. His dad said that's how the brothers were doing. That's how he winds up with Goliath. In the Old Testament picture of kingship always presents the king as a shepherd. I read an article today, I think it was, that said President Obama basically presented himself as the father nobody had, and he would straighten out the whole country. He was the father. Joe Biden pretends he's the grandfather, and we're lucky if you can remember where he's at. Now, I don't know. That's what I was reading today. But Christ is a shepherd. Now, in the Psalms, chapter 22, 23, and 24, we know 23 well. But chapter 22 is a suffering shepherd, a shepherd that's willing to suffer for the people. That's the good shepherd. In Psalm 23, yea, to walk through the valley of shadow of death, beside still waters, and he prepared a table before my enemies. All that. That's a sustaining shepherd. He's going to sustain us that our enemies will see. Now, remember, rich man in hell could see Lazarus. Doesn't say Lazarus could see him, because they had to let sin in. But he could see what was going down. Sustaining shepherd. And in Psalm 24, he's a sovereign shepherd. So you have your good shepherd, your great shepherd, and the chief of all shepherds. Right there. That's the Lord. He shall be great unto the ends of the earth. Hebrews chapter 13 says. I ran across purely by accident, John MacArthur out in California. And he took on Robert Schuller and Billy Graham, and I didn't know exactly what was going down. So I listened, and it was I guess, a sermon in his church where he was telling about the conversation and Larry King was involved in it. And he was talking about the three of them. And he said, Larry King, as a Jew, he just not believe in God because God will not judge people. God will not let you go through this. Now, I had a high school teacher, Mr. Goldberg, and he said the same thing. This was hell on earth. Right here, this is hell. He thought he was already serving in hell. I couldn't understand it as a young, I was 17, 18 years old. And I was sitting back thinking, this is not, I had enough knowledge to know that wasn't correct. But he said, when a person takes that point of view, like Larry King did, it's almost impossible to win them. And then he took Robert, the guy at Christian Cathedral, and Billy Graham, and I listened to what he said, and he ran a clip. And Billy Graham, basically, what he came out and said was, there'd be a lot of people in heaven that were not saved the way we thought that be saved. Confess in the mouth, believe in the heart that he rose from the grave, and thou shalt be saved. He said there'd be a lot of people in heaven that got in a different way. They believe in a Muslim God, they believe in a Jewish God, but all these gods will come together somehow and they'll get into heaven. And John MacArthur, I just blew a gasket over this. And I never heard it. I never seen it. And obviously, it's a couple of years old for me, but I sit back looking at it, and I've always said that there's a narrow road, there's a narrow way, there's one way we're taught in the Bible, the person gets saved. The idea that we open it up, and Billy Graham opened it up, doesn't make, who was he? Really, he's not supposed to be changing the doctrines of God. But that's what happens. He changed them. And there was a guy named Jerry Johnston that kind of took over Billy Graham's deal for a while. And he'd come to these towns, he'd get all these people together. And he used the same method. He sent somebody there to contact every denomination, invite them to come. And then he would put people from their church, that denomination, down on the floor where he was at. And if you came down and said, I'm a Methodist, they said, well, you need to go over to the Methodist. I'm Presbyterian, but the Presbyterians meet over here. And he came to Nacogdoches when I was a pastor there. And I had a lady that took her kids to it. And boy, she knocked off church for that. And later on, she came back and said, what do you think? And I said, I already know what goes on. That's why I try to tell you to stay out of it. Because nobody really gets saved. If you were a Baptist, he send you to the Baptist guy. Baptist preachers were there. And Billy Graham always called himself a Southern Baptist, but he never really identified with them. That's not what God has decided. It's not how God has been. It's one name under heaven, one way to be saved. There's a narrow road, a straight gate. It's all there. We have no right to widen it on our own. My brother goes to a Unitarian church. So according to Billy Graham, the Unitarians believe in Jesus Christ like I do. Well, I happen to know they don't. Because my brother's part of it. Now, this man shall be peace. Israel's shepherd will be her protector in the end times. The great shepherd. And he talks about 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. Now, I'd like to stand here tonight and tell you I know exactly what that means, but I don't. I've read all kinds of commentaries trying to figure it out, and I'd say the general idea in context is God will be the instrument, use his instrument of will to consolidate Israel's faith. He used 7 as the number of completion, and 8 is the number of new beginning. So there'll be a new beginning. It fits well with the chapter. With Bethel, Ephratah, there's Christ being born there, the man coming. All that fits well with it in context. But I have no way of proving that's exactly what it means. So even so, someday when I get to heaven, somebody would say, well, I'll get further and going to ask him about. I don't think you have to ask. You'll know it all when you get there. But it's fun thinking you might ask the Lord. Can you imagine that? When I get to heaven, I'm going to talk to the Lord, and he's going to, I don't think so. If you can talk back to the Lord and get away with it, you ain't in heaven. I'll tell you that. Now, the worldwide dispersal of the Jews this year. They're all over the world. I don't think there's a country on earth that doesn't have a Jew in it. It's part of God's judgment on them for rejecting Christ. They're all around. The Jews live in Gentile lands. The Jews are a curse and they're a blessing. Their contribution in their adopted countries many times is very significant. But you can go back to Hitler. Basically the Jews were too wealthy, and he went after them. And truth is, Adolf Hitler was part Jewish, but he kept that quiet. He wanted their trouble. Now, the Jews, when they get money and they become affluent, many times they become arrogant. They begin to exert their influence in that area where they're at. I had a Jewish fellow, Yuri, that I dealt with several times in Lafayette. I knew his grandson. I knew his mother-in-law. She was a member of the church. Her grandson was a member of the church. But the dad took him to 13. Dad took him to Israel for a bar mitzvah. And the last time I saw the son, he was getting out of the army. He was airborne. He was going to Israel to fight in Mossad, to fight against Palestine, I guess, the Arabs in far as I know, that is where he's at. But his dad was he was an auto mechanic, top of law off, and he owned his own auto business, mechanic-wise. He could fix anything. And he said, you bring your car to my shop, no cost. I said, I bring my car to your shop, you have to charge me. No, 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 no. I said, yeah, because it changes a relationship. I said, I'd rather be a customer and be a pastor than be your friend that way. And we went through a lot of different things. He would drive all the way, 130 miles once a week to go to the temple in New Orleans. He'd only buy his food at one kosher shop in New Orleans, 130 miles away. And my son was going to school before the mother-in-law died, and we didn't even know if Dad knew about me. But I'd tell the son, I'd say, I'll pick you up, we'll talk a little bit. Yeah, okay. But he made me let him out 2 blocks before his house. And he would walk home. He didn't want his dad to stand with me. Now, when the mother-in-law died, the father knew all about it. All about it. We did her funeral. But he was always arrogant, in a sense, about what was right and wrong. Now, we can call it political power, but a lot of times it turns into what we call anti-Semitism. Now, if you watch any of our politics, and you'll see it coming up pretty soon, AIPAC. That stands for American Israel Public Action Committee. Every Democrat, every Republican, they go to these guys and get money. 50% of the Democrats' campaign contributions are from the Jews. 25% of the Republicans are from the Jews, from this group. This is just one of many little groups that you can find. And the Jews are people that exile from their home like everybody else. They want to go home someday, but they're not quite ready. They're willing to support Israel, send money to Israel, but they don't want to leave the new home. They don't want to leave the new economy. They don't want to leave the roots that they've already established. Remember when Ezra went back, the first time he took nothing but the priests. The rest of them didn't want to go. They made a life in Babylon. That's the world. Communism. Now, Karl Marx and Joseph Engels were the brain trust behind communism and socialism. They're 2 Jews. 2 Jews that walked away from Israel, walked away from God, 2 Larry King types. And they brought communism into the world. This is why he talks about the remnant. The remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people. The Jews are always surrounded. Even the nation of Israel is surrounded. 3 sides, they got enemies in the Persian Gulf, so they're not going anywhere. But every community of the Jews gets surrounded. You know, when we had the COVID thing, the mayor of New York, he got mad at the Jews because they still had funerals. But in 24 hours, they got to be buried. I had a fellow that used to run First Recovery, and I went a couple times with him to pick people up. In my case, mostly nursing homes or accident, but he did a Jewish funeral. He wore his yarmulke, and he would tell me how they didn't believe in embalming. And I said, well, next time you're with them, ask them why they embalmed Jacob. Ask them why they embalmed Joseph, and why they carried his bones all the way to the promised land. They don't believe in embalming. I don't think he ever asked them. They would have jumped all over him. But the remnant of Jacob is a lion, in verse 8, among the beasts of the forest. He'll fight. He'll make noise. Now, just out of curiosity today, I looked up Jews, how many Jews are in Michigan. So I got a little history of them here. In 1761, Ezekiel Solomon came as a fur trader to help the British troops in their strategic locations. And where this fort is for sure, I'm not sure. Fort Michilimackinac. Then Chapman Abraham became a partner, and he went to Fort Detroit in 1762. Furs, needed goods, always in business. In the American Revolution, Solomon, Chapman, Abraham, and their other Jewish trading partners were credited with helping push back the wilderness here in Michigan. The Erie Canal brought more business to them. And the reason they came to Michigan, because they wanted freedom of religion. They came to the country of Michigan. They came to, well, Michigan wasn't even a state yet. And they came here for freedom of religion, but they did business. Michigan was a state, made a state in 1837. The very first Jewish community was Ann Arbor. Surprising. 1840s they settled there. The Five Wheel brothers started a business there, but they would not be open on the Sabbath and celebrate all the Jewish holidays. Where this Rackham building is, I'm not exactly sure where that is, but that was an old Jewish cemetery that they reinterred all the bodies. Jacob Wheel and his brothers eventually, his business moved to Chicago, or more business for them. In the 19th century, Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Jackson, and Kalamazoo became basically Jewish centers, a group of Jews. They said as a historical marker in Kalamazoo to Edward Israel. 1845, the German immigrants Samuel Leopold and Julian Austrian started a one-masted sloop up in Mackinac, UP. They sold 1,000 barrels of salted fish a day, a week, to as far away as Cleveland. Ended up with a fleet of ships and sailing vessels. And then copper was found up in the UP, so they went into copper. Now, I don't understand all that, because everybody that lives up in UP tells me it snows 7 months out of the year. I don't know. But these guys made a business up there. I'm just going to give a couple of highlights for you here. The oldest synagogue building in continuous use, even being used today, is Traverse City, 1885. The second one is Muskegon. In the 1890s, the Russian Jews established Palestine Colony. You know where that is today? That's Bad Axe, right up on the thumb. I've never been there, but I know Bad Axe. I know Bad Axe is in Michigan, and so is Hill. I know that. I'm that smart. Anyway, 1850, Detroit, 12th Orthodox men formed the first Jewish congregation down there. Yeah, where there was at least 12 Jews, they would form a synagogue. Men. 1912, Henry Ford. I watched a thing with Henry Ford on the History Channel. I said to Karen, I said, I don't know if his family, I don't know how they, what they did on History Channel, he was one mean guy. And in 1912, Henry Ford was actively anti-Semitic. He didn't like the Jews. And in fact, when the car business kicked off, the Jews weren't on any executive boards. Yet they hired the Jews to build their buildings, hired the Jews to count their money. They hired the Jewish people. And Ford was anti-Semitic. His factories, building the first industrial car line, was built by the Jewish guy. In fact, his name was Icahn. He continued to build Ford factories. There's approximately 85,000 Jews in the state of Michigan today. Now, my point is, they are surrounded. The other biggest Jewish area was Dearborn. Today, 200,000 Muslims live in Dearborn. The Jews are always surrounded, and that's what God told them they were going to be, by Gentiles. If you're not a Jew, you're a Gentile. It's kind of interesting to me when I'm looking at it, and I thought, how many Jews are there in Michigan, and what kind of history do they have in Michigan? They've always been profitable. They always wind up making money. It's like Uri. He had a great car business as far as repairing cars. He could look at your car and tell you what it was. Exactly what the problem was, generally by listening. But he made money doing it. Now, when Micah gave his prophecy of God to the Jews, it was the beginning of their time of sorrows. Because from this point on, they're going to be surrounded by the Gentiles. And Babylon, they were surrounded by Gentiles. Israel today, they're surrounded by Gentiles. Dearborn, surrounded by Gentiles. Wherever they've been, they've been surrounded. There's more American Gentiles around them than there is Jews. 2,500 years ago, God told them this was going to happen through Micah. And like I say, I think these prophets, they didn't rejoice. They didn't rejoice in having to tell Israel these things and judgment was coming. They didn't love that, but they had to tell the truth. You know, we're able to time and place that we can actually verify what Micah prophesied. We are living what we call the last days. And for all the trouble that Micah would tell them was coming, he foresaw a time what? When they would be victorious. Again, and they would have their God, they would have their shepherd, and be victorious. He saw the Gentiles, nations, Gentile people, overwhelming them, but eventually he saw them, 144,000, they take on all the Gentiles. Now the Antichrist, we're not told what he is, as far as whether he's Jewish, Gentile, Idumean. He's just a charismatic individual doing the work of Satan that can make you believe what you don't want to believe. You say, well, that's hard to believe. Maybe, but they're trying that today. They tell us there's no problem at the border. They tell us there's no problem with getting gas, but there is. Tell us we're going to pay you to stay home and not work, but yet the Bible says we should work. You know, Bill Clinton's the one that started releasing all the bad news on Fridays. Why did he release it on Friday afternoon? Because you had 2.5 days for it to sink in before you had to answer. So they do their document dumps on a Friday afternoon. And Republicans followed it too. Don't get me wrong. Some of these guys followed it to that day. The Jew has a struggle. The struggle with God, struggle with his doctrine, struggle with the faith in God, and only in the end times is a remnant. Notice 3 times he says here, there's only a remnant that God can work with. Only a remnant he can deal with because they know the truth. They follow the Lord and they believe by faith. Brother Jack?
How'd that go today, Grant? How'd Patty go?
She's all right. We both had doctor's appointments, and then I had to take her to dialysis too. So.
Okay, that's okay. When you're running a little late, I didn't know if she was having problems at dialysis today or not.
It was better today.
Good.
She put on some water weight, so they got to see her tomorrow too.
Oh,
So she don't like that.
no. Can can you get in the hospital with her?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
You,
Yeah, I can't stay with her. I can take her up and then go get her. I can't stay with her. Yeah. But I got to put gloves on. I got to put a gown on.
so yeah, that's so we're not totally out of the COVID restrictions yet. Other things that's new this week, Fred Norris family, he passed away. Poochie's lung CT scan. When's that one due, Joni? Okay. Sometime in July. And with what happened yesterday and recently, we need to keep people in prayers that have been affected by the tornadoes, by the severe winds, by all the rain. Um, an example around here, we've gotten anywhere from 3 to 5 inches in this area, and our gauges at home showed that we've gotten between 4 and 4.5 inches. My son lives down in the Brighton area. He's gotten over 8 inches in the same time frame. He can't even get into parts of his yard because it's underwater. So we got to keep all of the people in our prayers because people with flooded basements and homes destroyed. Bob Mullen family that had a funeral Saturday. He passed away on Father's Day. Karen has a doctor's appointment for the neck. Did she have that, Pastor? They're going to do an MRI. Oh, yeah. She, yeah, so Karen hasn't had all this stuff done. She's still having uh, sugar problems, and her insulin pump is giving problems. So hopefully they'll be able to get the test and stuff. Oh, Louie and Diane are traveling, so we need to keep them in our prayers. Diane is having an MRI of her brain in July, and Levon, Diane's sister, tripped and arm restrained, and for the travel. So that those sisters are having problems, aren't they? Oh my goodness. There's only 3, Grant? 3, okay. I was going to say if there's another one, I was wondering how she was. And so we need to also keep Patty, besides all of the things with the that she's having, the rheumatoid arthritis. She's having problems with that, and the on her hands, and the doctor's saying there's not much they can do for it. I thought they replaced individual joints. Okay. Because that's what I heard, that they could do crazy things like that. Dave Pritton has got brittle bones and ALS. Our oh, Well, let's hope that they can get something done for him.
Depending for a wheelchair, we're in falling and stumbling.
Oh, with brittle bones, you definitely don't want to be falling. And no,
His prognosis is not good. It's a new variant. What was the purpose of going to Texas? His daughter lives there. Someone was out there a few years ago. His daughter bought a house down there. And his brother was there. And his daughter had the whole house remodeled. She's fed up with it. So he's going down there with his wife and go to his daughter.
so
He's going to, pretty soon he's going to have probably hung up with this weight.
wow.
I was surprised. I mean, I knew he had problems. Last time I saw him, he couldn't move. You know, so I'm not real close to him, so I didn't know all that was going on. So I said, somebody must live in Glen, I think.
So he's moving to Texas
Yeah, they went
to be with to live with his daughter because she's remodeling the house. Had to because he started falling so quick. Yep.
he fell and he lost his voice a couple times when he was preaching and all that.
Yep.
Fillmore's got, I played softball with him for 35 years. And I was laughing about it because I played infield. The outfielder, they couldn't, before I played good back, couldn't use his head. He was a good ball player, but outfield, he happened when he worked for Heather Ridge Baptist Church in Tulsa. And he was a captain. Other than that, I'd say I love him. So there's, I kind of feel bad that we go through so information on him, but I'm just not really really close to him. I've seen the media or something. It always is. If you're in St. Pat, you see him, you don't see him around town.
We found out on mine about the test that they're going to run. The stress test was kind of confusing because they said that a regular stress test wasn't going to give them all the information, and the instructions that they gave me when we left was for a treadmill. And it turns out that the kind of stress test that I have to have part of it as a treadmill, and 2 days later I come back and have uh, it's a chemical stress test, some type of radioactive test, nuclear test, I think they said they called it, yeah. So,
I did the treadmill,
yeah,
and I ran and ran and ran. I said, what's going to need 3 minutes? Well, I mean, as far as it gets, I'm fine. I mean, it needed 5 minutes time. I quit.
Joni, did Poochie say anything about Jennifer Baumgartner's baby? Is the baby still in IC and the neonatal unit? Okay. Okay. Great. Baby had to stay, but mom got to go home. And then Flossie had a get together for her 90th birthday Sunday afternoon. So she's kind of frail because her stroke took away her sense of taste. Joni said that she's getting really thin because she eats to stay alive only, not that it even tastes good because she can't taste anything. Poochie lung tube out soon. I didn't know that it was still there, Joni. Right. Okay. And our friend Kathy Daly, that we said that she had her last chemo. Um, she had her last chemo as it was because she went back to the doctor, and he said now we're just going to go on a maintenance program, and she has to still go every 2 weeks until October. They've changed the chemicals. It's part of the same chemicals, and they've dropped two of the original chemicals, and it's a maintenance program. So they're hopefully that she don't have the massive reactions that she was, where she was getting like hives when they were doing it. Yep. Yesterday or today, because she had her test today. So we'll know more tomorrow. We all of us have to be thankful and be blessed for the things that we have, the health that we have. We may complain about the fact that, oh, our back hurts, or the fact that our arthritis in the shoulders and our knees and every place, and we don't feel well some days. Think about the people that are on this list, the people that no longer can hardly walk, the people that have to move in with somebody else to have them take care of them. It's the Lord blesses us each and every day that He lets us get up. And I just thank Him I personally thank Him every day that He lets me get up. So are there any additions, changes, corrections, anything that we have? Yeah. So Sue's still having issues at work because of people quitting and all the changes and everything. So he's got all the work to do, plus have to train somebody. So if anybody has a update that they can call Joni with, it would be appreciated, and she can put it on here. We still have our praises out there for Ron Boone, and also for the fact that a lot of the COVID things have been taken care of. We're no longer in a total shutdown. We're no longer prisoners. It used to be that they would quarantine the sick rather than quarantine the healthy, like we've been. So, okay. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you knowing that you are the great healer. We thank you for the fact that each and every one of us are able to be here, that you give us the health and the strength to be able to get up daily so that we can come and be able to pray for other people, that we can be able to worship and understand some of the things a little bit better each time that we come and listen to the pastor be able to preach to us. We ask that you help the people that are on our prayer list, especially help Karen with the fact of her blood sugar going out of control and she needs some help there. Be with the Crittentons as he moves down to be with his daughter in Texas. As he served you for so many years, please serve him and keep him at ease and at peace the best that he can with the conditions that are going on. May we be able to pass the news on to someone this week and be able to be a light for you at all times. And we ask that you please help our church grow, help our community, and please help the leaders of our country and our country. The things that are happening right now, we need them to realize that the things that they're doing are against you rather than for you. And that's what we want, is we are supposed to be a God-loving country. We ask all of this in Jesus' precious name. Amen.